I was muted. Folks. I don't know how that happened. Actually, we're back. Not restarting this week. It's a stressful day in this country. I'm not gonna talk about the election in any meaningful way at all. I'm not gonna pretend like that. I'm not gonna misdirect you to something else that we're gonna talk about being the most important thing happening in this country. It's a stressful day, and there's my political take is I just feel like there's no good next couple months. Maybe I'm a pessimist. It doesn't matter to me who wins. I mean, it does matter to me who wins, but it is irrelevant who wins. It's going to be a shitty couple months, probably a shitty couple years. So yeah, I would say this like these last couple elections have not made me particularly proud to be an American. Without going into what is that guy's name? Lee Greenwood. Uh, so yeah, the real life take that I have, the comedy related take that I have is that what I do believe will happen is if Harris wins, comedy is going to be in good shape. Through the Obama years, we saw like just absolutely no rules in comedy. I started in the late part of the Obama years, and in the Trump years, we saw everybody get very sensitive. And in the last couple of years, in the Biden years, we've seen comedy kind of return to being offensive and that being okay. So my comedy take is that I'd like comedy to remain like people aren't super easily offended. But yeah, I mean, it's just that we're gonna be fucked. I don't want to be a pessimist, but or we're gonna be fine. It's a resilient country, whatever. It's just gonna be so annoying. That's what I'll say. Is like no matter what side wins, no matter what side loses, both sides are gonna make it very fucking annoying. Um. So anyway, it's like I'm not like dying to do this podcast. I feel a little bit obligated to. I did want to talk about the Seahawks. That's also very annoying. What do we got here? We got Kyle Taylor, my buddy, in my. I used to do a college radio show with him many times. I've told the story about how I believe he still owes me a Brazilian wax, which is an odd sentence to say. We used to do a radio show where we made a bet about Major League Soccer's. He has to know if he comments this is going to happen, by the way. But yeah, he owes me a Brazilian wax. Also, I don't know how this happened. You fall back, you're supposed to get more sleep, but I'm like more tired. I don't know if it's just anxiety about the world crumbling or what, but yeah, I'm like I am exhausted. I will say I had an inspirational comedy weekend. That's another thing that happens, by the way, when you do comedy at the level that I'm at is you'll go work with someone who's like very successful. Oh yeah, he says Drea still gives him shit about it. That's his wife, mother of his children. Probably the person who's going to have to film the Brazilian wax when it eventually happens, because I know Kyle Taylor is an honorable man who will actually follow through on that bet. I worked with this dude named Mike Falzone. Well, I wasn't like I like heard his name. He's been around comedy forever. I wasn't like super familiar with his stand up or what his deal was. And I got booked on these like it was kind of a confusing booking because he was doing two podcasts, one crowd work show and one stand up show. And I wasn't sure. I got booked for the whole weekend, but not at all for the first podcast. So, but by the way, I had this gut feeling I would have to go in and do some like audio stuff for the comedy club, which ended up being right. But it was kind of confusing. His show's called Surrounded. It's a crowd work show. Wasn't exactly sure what my role would be on that. Like I was booked to quote unquote feature, but I didn't really feature. And then the opening for him the next day was like kind of, anyways. So the shows were all amazing, all super fun. The thing that's inspirational, and also the thing that like, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine named Charles Hall, who by the way is going through it right now. Go look up Charles Hall on GoFundMe. He's going through some kind of medical and mental health issues with him and his, well, I don't need to get into too much personal stuff about him, but he's got a GoFundMe out there. Very funny comedian who's opened for me a variety of places. And he opened for me in Spokane when I did the Great Outdoors Comedy Festival. And he and I had a similar experience with that, which was, while it was incredible to perform for that many people, being around comedians who are that successful at his and my level of success, you kind of convince yourself in comedy that like success is always around the corner. And when you see somebody who can sell 5,000 tickets without any promotion on their own, basically, in Spokane, a guy who takes a private jet, brings two absolute crushing headlining comedians, two comedians who are doing headlining tours on their own to open for him. Like, I'm not saying I need all those things to be like happy or successful, but what I am saying is, like, it makes you, it just makes you understand how far you are away from that. And I get the hangover from that. And I'm having a little bit of that too with this Mike Falzone weekend, because the thing about it that was so inspirational is he's got this podcast called Dynamic Banter. He's got this stand-up show called Surrounded, this crowd work show. So fun. And it's like renowned nationwide. Both these things, by the way, this podcast is huge. I was not really like aware of how big the podcast was. There were people who came that were like 10-year fans of this podcast. Maybe not quite 10 years, but like been around for a long time. His co-host is a dude named Steve Zaragoza, who is not a stand-up comedian, but did the crowd work show. Fucking murdered, by the way. Like, that was really cool to watch, especially now. I watched his whole set because he's a super nice guy. And I found out before the show that he was not a stand-up comedian. Now I found out that was his first time ever doing, and he fucking killed. And great bits, by the way. He had like kind of prepared, not like prepared, it's supposed to be completely unprepared, but he had like well thought out funny bits about stuff that the audience brought up. But the thing that was inspirational was not like, I mean, Mike Falzone sold 400 tickets across 4 shows in 2 nights. The thing that was inspirational is how many people I talked to after because I only did the late show Friday. So I was pretty familiar because it's a crowd work show, like small room. There's like quite a few people in the room that I like recognized the next day. There were, I would estimate at least 20 people who flew into the SeaTac airport and somehow got themselves down to Tacoma, Washington, so that they could attend all 4 Mike Falzone shows, both podcasts, the crowd work show and the regular stand-up show. And that's so cool. That's so rare. It's so crazy that by the way, I'm getting like texts that I assume are about the election. So I'm trying to I gotta put myself on Do Not Disturb because it's not like a spoiler alert. I just don't want to. I'm so just dreading this day. Anyway, it's made me really rethink what this podcast should be, if it's like any good, which that's what I'm saying is like, is this just like post good work weekend hangover? Maybe. Also, like, it's not like this thing's crushing with, there's not like huge audience for it. And, I don't know if you've noticed, there's an imbalance in enthusiasm between me and Alex for doing the podcast. And I think maybe I'm coming to his side a little bit. And I think if it's going to grow, and I don't really have the bandwidth for not very many people. There's like 16 people between 2 platforms watching live right now. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to do this several times a week, to all the preparation required to make it good. But we could probably make something that's fun, that's like more comedy focused. I'm also like, it's funny because this is the first time I've started a podcast in my life where stand-up was actually making me a lot of money. And I'm like, well, fuck, this is like taking effort away from stand-up. This is really me taking effort away from another thing that I arguably like more, and maybe I should not be spending that kind of time in this. So we're gonna there'll be some. I'm thinking about what this is gonna look like in the coming year, but I do want to talk about and also nobody gives a fuck because there's not that many people listening. I could blow this thing up and start over. I've had a bunch of different podcasts. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. It's not depression. I want to make that clear. I'm tired. I'm inspired, and I needed a third rhyme. I don't know. Seahawks are incredibly frustrating, though. That's the diversion from the election that we need, is the Seahawks being just remarkably frustrating. And I'm going to check real quick. I'm going to check ESPN.com and make sure. The Saints traded away Marshawn Lattimore. That's interesting. But, I mean, the Seahawks made their trades earlier in the season. They were probably not going to make a trade, and it looks like they did not. There wasn't I wouldn't call any of the trades that got made like a blockbuster. But what I will say is, if I was the Seahawks, it would be impossible to figure out, should I be buying, should I be selling? Because, one, they've already kind of started the process of buying. I really am, by the way, I'm so sick of this idea that because they probably have a compensatory pick coming, that Ernest Jones costs nothing. Like, that's not true. It's just not the reality. Just because, like, it's valuable to have. It's like I mean, you don't even have to really make an analogy to understand why that doesn't make sense. If you had 2 first-round picks and you traded one of them away, just because you still have a first-round pick does not mean that you didn't give up anything. It's very stupid. It's a very stupid thought. But the Seahawks lost to the Rams. They're 4-5. They've now lost 5 of their last 6. They're 2-4 at home. Geno Smith, I would say, gave I mean, it's certainly receiving mixed reviews. I don't think there's anyone arguing at this point that Geno Smith had a good game, but I don't think Geno Smith is quote unquote the problem. I mean, and I think that, like, most people would probably agree with that at this point. I don't think that he was the problem, but I don't know that Geno Smith is like, I don't know. Let's take a look at this box score. Here we go. Is this going to be insane looking? No, this isn't bad. So Geno Smith goes, 21-34, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 363 yards, gets sacked 7 times. The sacks, it's interesting because I do think that, like, in the last couple of years, we've been conditioned to this idea that sacks are very much a quarterback stat, much more than we've ever thought. So, like, the idea being that Russell Wilson was responsible for more of the sacks that he was the victim of than the offensive line was, and maybe the offensive line was actually better than they were. And then in this case, I think, like, it's pretty obvious when you watch Geno Smith that he's getting pressure very quickly. Now, is this offense maybe a little more complex? Does it require a little more time to get the ball out? Maybe. I mean, I think Ryan Grubb is a little more of an innovator than Shane Waldron was, than Brian Schottenheimer was, than Darrell Bevell was. But I don't necessarily think that means that these guys are running more complex routes or require more time. Geno Smith is getting hit very quickly, like by league average, compared to league average. So even if the offense is scheming up an average time of release, shit's getting there quick. So I don't know. I've never been a guy that thinks like Geno Smith is the guy, that thinks Geno Smith is the future. I think I've said many times, I think what the Seahawks are doing with the quarterback position is interesting. And if it works, I think it might shift the way that the NFL deals with the quarterback position. I mean, maybe they're not the first to get there. I think the Lions with Jared Goff kind of did the same thing, where they just were like steadfast and kept Jared Goff. Have never really drafted a quarterback incredibly high, and now the they're a Super Bowl contender and they have a reasonably priced, which is amazing to say for a guy that I think is making or is set to make over $50 million a year, but they have, by NFL standards, a reasonably priced quarterback. Is Geno Smith? I mean, Geno Smith's older than Jared Goff. He's arguably not as good. Probably not as good. There's nothing to me that's like you have to pay Geno whatever he wants to keep him here. I guess that's what I would say if you're asking me, is he the guy? If that's how you define the guy. But I don't think there's anything that occurred on Sunday or that has occurred this year to me that says the outcome would be any different if Sam Howell was there. If Sam Howell was starting. Because it's not Geno Smith failing to get the ball out. It's Geno Smith being inundated with pressure the moment the ball enters his hand. And I actually have to think there's been, I think it's the last 3 weeks, there's been 3 separate times where snaps went over Geno Smith's head. And I want to actually pull this up. So was it on the first drive? How did that work out? Maybe it was on the second drive. There was another one of these situations, and I very much, so Geno Smith fumbled. So on, this is interesting the way this gets shown. On the second drive, Geno Smith fumbles is the way the play-by-play reads it. That's not really what happened, right? It was a shotgun snap that goes over Geno Smith's head. Obviously, the Seahawks got to figure out this because this is 3 times in 2 weeks that it's happened. But for Seahawks for Kenneth Walker III fantasy owners, I don't remember. Yeah, so the team loses 18 yards. I think he takes on all of that. I think he takes on all that loss. And I remember last week when that happened, people freaking out. I think it happened again this week. I also found out something that's kind of interesting on the last play. So Jalen Waddle is a guy that I have in fantasy. And he caught 2 balls all day. One for 12 yards and one for a 7-yard touchdown. And then on the final play of the game, he received a lateral on a pass to Devin Achane, I think. He received a lateral, ran way back, and lost like 25 yards. But because Achane caught the ball, Waddle doesn't get the reception, but he loses all the yards. So technically, in his box score, he had 2 catches, long of 12, including a 7-yard touchdown for -4 yards. I have not subscribed to Football Reference. I would bet there are not many games, if any games, where a receiver has negative yards and a touchdown catch. In fact, maybe I'll subscribe just for that purpose. But yeah, I actually wonder. First off, it's hard for me to imagine if it's hard for me to imagine. So the Seahawks are facing 2nd and 31. And they pass to Jackson Smith-Njigba, who gains 22 yards. That sequence of plays alone, that drive alone, might be enough to narrow the gap on points and the Seahawks win in regulation. It's obviously a game that ends tied in regulation. Those plays are enormous. Those plays that essentially turn a neutral game state into a almost sure punt. And then in this case, it becomes an interception. And I think the pressure has something to do with Geno Smith's interception issue. I think that like in a couple cases, there's just been like he's had balls tipped or his hand contacted, which is a byproduct of pressure, but isn't necessarily. There's been bad choices. Like obviously the Seahawks need to stop turning the ball over as much as they are. Does that mean that Geno Smith is capital T, capital P, the problem, trademark symbol? I don't know about that, but something has to give. And so what are the Seahawks playoff odds at right now? Seahawks playoff odds. By the way, I do want to look at this. So to kind of go with what I'm saying, Geno Smith's getting pressured a ton. He's facing like dudes in his face, facing these like not clean situations to pass out of. And like pull up the so this is PFF's grades for Seahawks players. No surprise, Jackson Smith-Njigba went off, had a couple plays. You know, it's really easy to say, and we've seen this a couple times. I've seen this from a couple people. Well, if you give him back the 78 yards or whatever that the Seahawks got penalized, or that he like balls he caught where the Seahawks got penalized, that's obviously not how the game of football works. In fact, I haven't looked it up, but I suspect on at least one of those, he ended up recouping some of those yards on the rest of the drive. Also, if the Seahawks, the whole situation might be different. You can't just tack 80 yards onto this total and go, well, he would have had 230 yards. That's just not how football works. It changes the state of the game, which changes the way the rest of the game gets played. However, Jackson Smith-Njigba played incredible. He did kind of everything that you thought he could do, which was some combination of, I think, what Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf bring, which is very solid route runner, can be moved all over the field, very versatile, like Tyler Lockett, and then yards after the catch. I was ready after he dropped the and in fact, I think that's actually so he also drops the pass that leads to the first interception, I believe. And I was like literally typing into Twitter, are we on Jackson Smith-Njigba bust watch? And from that moment on, he became the best receiver in the NFL this week. Incredible game from him. Incredible comeback from him and Geno Smith. Here's the PFF grades. Jackson Smith-Njigba, 92.5, best player on the offense. No surprise. Second best player on the offense is Geno Smith. Do you hate PFF? I don't. I understand the flaws. Bake the flaws in. Geno Smith did not have an incredibly bad game. Some of his bad decisions, not forgivable. I'm with that. Some of his bad decisions that look like bad decisions were like, is one of those interceptions on Jackson Smith-Njigba? Probably. It was him, right? I'm not crazy. I'm actually surprised if that's right. I'm surprised that his grade's so high. I mean, he did have a hell of a game, but to have like is that right? Hold on. Is that right? Maybe I'm wrong. That's got to be right. Isn't that right? Am I crazy? Yeah, okay. It bounced out of JSN's hands. So, anyways, I'm actually seeing here. This is Seahawk Nerd on Twitter says, deep breath. First interception, ball bounces off JSN's hands. Second interception, arm hit while throwing. Third interception, Barner is held in his route, no flag. Yeah, I mean the JSN one, I don't have a good argument for. I think the arm getting hit while throwing, that's not like a fluke. That's arguably a ball that Geno Smith should not be throwing. If you're not going to be able to cleanly make a throw, there's a strong argument that you should not be throwing that ball. But that being said, I hate when Bomani Jones clues me into something that I was not aware of. But who was it about? Fuck. It was about it was about how when teams have a black starting quarterback and a white backup, the fans inevitably eventually want the white backup. And I'm like sensitive to this now because I've found out about this in the offseason and I'm looking into it, or I'm like watching this kind of occur and watching the kind of rumbles for for Sam Howell start, and I don't think Sam Howell's the answer. Sam Howell does not bring something so different to the Seahawks that Geno Smith doesn't have. I think Geno Smith has a stronger arm. He's very accurate. He doesn't have time to make good decisions all the time. Typically makes good decisions when he does. Cody White, by the way. So Cody White blocks the kick, has a big catch. I'd like to see more snaps for Cody White, who gets, 35 total offensive snaps? 35 out of 80? Is that right? Yeah, 35 out of 80. He was great. I don't know. I guess the deal is you kind of want to just like I guess it almost is a little parallel to the election where like I just want to fast forward to when this is done. Can we just fast forward to the end of this and move on to the next? Can we skip this one? Can we skip this season? Because I feel like it's just going to be a season of frustration. There's not going to be any version of this that's like gratifying or where the Seahawks are anything short of just frustrating and inconsistent, it seems like. And yeah, I don't know. Oh, by the way, yeah, the other part of this is the other controversy. It's not just Geno Smith, but it's the fourth down going for it. There were three things where I thought the Seahawks were like bad, neutral, and good. There was a timeout. I'm going to find the exact moment. But let's see. What time was this at? So the Seahawks took a timeout with 2 minutes and 41 seconds left. So let me rephrase this slightly. The Rams have the ball. The Seahawks take a timeout with 2 minutes, 41 seconds left. And I think that was it's obviously not a game-altering mistake per se. Like I think it's a relatively small impact, but so the Seahawks end up they end up scoring a touchdown anyway. But on their drive, on what could have been their final drive, they take a knee on what's actually their final drive of regulation, but what could have been their final drive. Luckily, they end up with, big plays to Jackson Smith and Jigba. They end up with big play to Cody White. Like, they end up with these big plays, but so they take the timeout with 2 minutes 41 seconds left. Then the Rams run a play that takes up more than 1 second, and they get to run the clock down to the 2-minute warning. Had the Seahawks not taken a timeout, and let's say the clock starts at the same time, which is, there's a little bit of ambiguity, I think. There's a little bit of fluff on clock operators in the NFL, but let's say the clock starts at the exact same time. That means that the Rams have to run another play before the 2-minute warning. And in either case, what you end up with is the Rams punting after the 2-minute warning. But if you don't take that timeout, after that, you're probably down 3 or 4 extra seconds because the Rams run a play at the very end of that, and they take up some time, and then they punt with like 1:57 left, say. But the big difference is you still have a timeout. To me, it's a bang-bang decision. It doesn't actually end up, in this case, having an impact on the outcome. But over the course of a bunch of simulations, it's better to have a timeout than not have a timeout. Obviously, in fact, I could check this out, but I'm not going to because I don't care enough, and nobody's going to be on my side. But you don't take that timeout there. That's my opinion. And because you can also, by the way, I don't even think you risk it because I do know I'm fully on board with it's tight there. The clock operator, you're depending on the clock operator being accurate and quick and making that decision quickly. Even if you take that timeout after the 2-minute warning, you're left with essentially the same outcome. So let's say the clock by the way, I recognize nobody gives a shit about this like I do. Let's say the clock operator doesn't actually restart the clock till 2:39. It runs down to the 2-minute warning. Then the Rams run a play, and then they punt. So you've got 2 stops in between the punt. What do you lose? Like an extra couple seconds? But the value is you get to keep the timeout. Seahawks end up scoring anyway. It's a moot point. Then we get to they score a touchdown with, 50 seconds left. And you have the choice, go for 2, not go for 2. The modern NFL has become very willing to go for 2 in this situation. I think the Seahawks should have gone for 2, but I would call this a neutral choice where I don't think that the difference is like so obvious. I think that the Seahawks know their roster better than I do. They know their 2-point plays better than I do. Let's see. NFL 2024 2-point conversion odds. Let's see. Do we have 2024? Oh, this is interesting. This is actually very interesting. Teams have succeeded on just 31% of their 2-point conversion attempts. Okay. I'll eat shit on that one. That's this year. Teams, I think, are doing it more than they ever have been. Maybe, I think in some cases, there's teams that are worse that are doing it. I would have said they should go for it. Go for 2. But that's why I call it a neutral thing, because it's not, I don't think it's so obvious. And then in overtime, they go for it on 4th down instead of kicking a field goal. And 1, I think it was the right decision. 2, the Rams showed you exactly why. Because, by the way, I'm watching this video of, I got to share this. It's, this is Mike Florio, right? That's his name. I always get him and the Lombardi guy mixed up. What the fuck is going on? This feels like if this is a wild outfit he's wearing. Can we just enjoy this outfit? I'll just play it in the background. We don't need to hear it. That's crazy, man. We'll stop sharing that. Let's go back. Let's finish out this podcast because I'm tired. I'm exhausted by life. I'm exhausted by the Seahawks. I'm exhausted by the time of year we're at, in the year we're in. But I thought that the 4th down decision was the most cut and dry, because either way, you have to stop. If you kick the field goal, you have to stop the Rams from scoring a touchdown. They didn't do that anyway. Riq Woolen had a chance to really close that game out at multiple points. Did not do it. I don't know what the Riq Woolen era looks like at the end of this in Seattle. I don't know if I don't know if he's played well enough to be traded. Ultimately, that's your preference, right? I think he's got a spot on the depth chart as long as he's healthy. But it doesn't take a ton to me to go this is not a dude that seems to play the way Mike Macdonald seems to want his players to play. And if you could get a 2nd-round pick, a 3rd-round pick for him, would you take it? You're coming up close to having to pay him, I believe. I think it's after he's a free agent after next year. I'm pretty much, if you could get something for him in the offseason, if you can get something for Riq Woolen in the offseason, if he's done enough to rehab his stock. Otherwise, you just ride it out for another year and hope that he I don't know what the outcome. I guess what you get out of it is another year of a pretty good cornerback who doesn't fit the scheme very well. It seems to me like Riq Woolen he's so good at certain aspects of playing corner and so antithetical to what Pete Carroll wanted out of his corners, to what Mike Macdonald will likely want out of his defensive backs, that seems to me like the fan base could very quickly start turning on Riq Woolen. Did I miss anything else? Connor Williams, the signing has been bad. There's no like offensive line fixes available midseason in the NFL. I mean, isn't David Bakhtiari still a free agent? But it seems like he's probably retired if he's not back now. And two, yeah, he's a free agent. Two, I'm sure NFL teams know more than I do about David Bakhtiari. But they also, why would he want to sign with the Seahawks? Why would he not go sign with a team that's a more obvious contender? It's just not obvious to me that there's offensive line help actually available out there. And also, did Bakhtiari? He played left tackle, right? Is that right, or did he play? Let's see if we can find this out really quickly. Yeah, he played left tackle in Green Bay. There's just not help out there. They're not going to fix this problem. Also, if you think Christian Haynes is the answer, I've said it before, it reminds me of the Sam Heward situation. I don't know why you would think you know more about what he's showing in practice. He's showing in practice. What he's showing in practice is leading to the team, keeping him off the field and keeping Anthony Bradford on the field while Anthony Bradford is having a terrible season. An absolutely terrible season. And Christian Haynes, the Seahawks' third-round pick, a right guard who most people said could step in and start for most teams right now, is not showing enough to unseat Anthony Bradford, who's having a dog shit season. Also, I have money on the Seahawks to win, to go to the NFC Championship game. And it looked like I loved before the season when there was no, when the Mike Macdonald era was still virginal and we had not seen the flaws. Is that also, I guess I'm curious, you can leave them in the comments because I'm about to end this podcast. Do you think that, is the Mike Macdonald era over before it started? Are we done with Mike Macdonald already? Are we done with John Schneider? When do we start talking about John Schneider? I know in Seattle we're like trying to replace every front office at once right now, so it's a little bit tough to keep my front offices straight, but I don't know. There's so much uncertainty with the Seahawks that I don't feel good about the Seahawks the rest of the season. I feel like this is what I call the 12-5 win or 12-5 team that I will give myself a bit of credit. I tried to be slightly different from the other folks that had picked. I probably thought they were more like an 11-6 team. Now I think they're like a 7-10 team. It's a team that's 4-5 right now, which means I have them only winning 3 additional games this season. I don't have a lot of optimism right now. And I don't think there's like, I guess the problem is, I don't think they're one off season away either. So, I don't know. All right, I got to go stress out about this election. I've been doing what I do. Anytime I'm stressed out, I've been playing Madden. And I'm leading the Seahawks in Madden. I got rid of Geno Smith. I simulated through the first season, and we're rebuilding, folks. We're rebuilding. Playoff contender snuck in 2026, and we're going to really make it happen in 2027. All right. Nobody gives a shit about that. Casey McLean Comedy everywhere. Bickerson's Brewhouse, November 23rd. I'm at Side Hustle Brewing in Kirkland, Washington, November 21st. Come out to those. Thank you. I love you. Bye. All right.